Hey, I'm Drew Russell, your Sarasota real estate expert, and today we are going to talk about 4 key things you need to know about the Florida real estate purchase and sale contract before you sell or buy your next home. So the first thing I need to say before I get into the topic of the Florida real estate contract is I am not a licensed attorney in the state of Florida. So by no means should this video be construed as any sort of legal advice. You can always consult a real estate attorney if you have deeper legal questions. But for our purposes, as an agent practicing for almost 20 years in this area, I have a lot of experience in dealing with the contract forms that we see here in Florida commonly. And what you might not know is we basically have 2 very common contract forms that are used. They look very similar and are almost identical in a lot of ways, except for the item of condition. How are we selling the property? Are we selling it as is? Are we selling it with a warranty behind the condition of the home? And how this is handled in the contract can really affect the flow of your deal, the rights of your buyer, the rights of you as a seller, and has a lot of different nuances that we're going to try to cover here, and it can really affect how the transaction goes. So again, we're going to cover 4 key areas. So the first main area that can really affect the deal is what I'm going to call the sole discretion clause. So in our as-is agreement, it's as is, but the buyer has the right in their sole discretion to cancel the contract up to the end of the inspection period, which is negotiated in the deal. This means that a buyer can cancel if they don't decide they like you, they have a bad hair day, the stock market goes down, for any reason. So a contract that's executed until it gets through the inspection period on an as-is contract really isn't a very solid deal. Conversely, our standard contract actually provisions for repair limits in the agreement ahead of time, and it removes this right of sole discretion from the buyer to pull out of the deal based on the results of the inspection. Now there's warranty for the seller to guarantee in that agreement, which we'll cover more later. But really, you have to think about going into it as a seller and as a buyer, are we comfortable with this sole right of cancellation on the buyer's side? So the next really big difference between these 2 contract forms is going to be money. On our standard contract, we actually have a repair limit built into the agreement, and it basically says, hey, the buyer's going to come and do their inspections. If anything is found that's wrong with the house that meets X, Y, and Z criteria, hey, Mr. Seller, Mrs. Seller, you're going to go ahead and fix that, before closing and provide evidence of that repair to the buyer. And again, that's a pre-negotiated amount in the deal. The as-is contract, there is no guarantee of repairs, there's no monetary limit, there's nothing like that. They basically do the inspection, they can cancel in their sole discretion if they'd like to. So point number 3 is that you can pre-negotiate or oftentimes renegotiate. Which works better for you? Under the as-is contract, we've talked about that the seller is under no obligation to make any repairs, and if they don't care about the buyer walking away, no big deal, right? But it can be a big deal because a lot of times a property going on and off the market can be seen as a negative feature. And what we want to make sure of a lot of times is that a deal goes together. An as-is contract, the buyer may come back and say, you know what, these are items that are not in the condition we knew about or condition that we expected, and therefore we want to renegotiate the sale price based on these items. And that's where we basically reopen negotiations all over again. So the term as is to me is a bit of a misnomer because the buyer usually isn't accepting the property completely as is. Whereas on the standard contract, if you have the repair limit in place, you've pre-negotiated pretty much how you're going to be handling repairs. It makes it kind of easier sailing into closing and removes a little bit of uncertainty on if a deal is going to go through or not because the buyer doesn't have the right to renegotiate or walk away. Now there are a lot more technical terms that go into this where certain situations can have certain different outcomes, especially on the standard contract. It's too heady to get into on a short YouTube video. Happy to discuss it with you. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. But overall, The big difference is, do you want to pre-negotiate or potentially renegotiate? And the final and fourth item that comes up in terms of the inspection clauses in both of these contracts refers mostly to the standard contract, and that is, how are the repairs going to be done? The contract says that the repairs must be done by the licensed professionals where required. They must be done in a workmanlike manner. If they can't be completed by closing, there's a process for escrowing an overage to have the repairs done after closing, which can be a whole nother discussion. Whereas with as is, it's really, if you agree to any sort of financial credit or repairs, you can kind of go with whatever format you would like. So as a seller, you might enjoy the security of not being held subject to a buyer's whim to cancel in an inspection period, but also realize that when you get a repair request on a pre-negotiated amount of items, you'll have to go ahead and get those items done. And recently they slipped in a clause that you either have them repaired or fully estimated within 10 days of the inspection repair request. So that puts a little bit of pressure on the seller to kind of go ahead and get things moving. So this really is not a one-size-fits-all option in terms of which contract form that we use when we're writing. In fact, I have active deals right now on both forms. They both tend to work for different people in different situations. I would say what I see right now, though, is probably 90% of contracts that we see are on this as-is form, which means when a deal is new, when you see a house go under contract initially, there may be a right for the buyer to walk away from that home in that initial inspection period. So in closing, what I would say is, this video, I probably could have talked for a half an hour about the differences between the two contracts and how inspections and repairs are handled. But really, the takeaway is you need to talk with your agent or your attorney about your expectations for how you want the sale of your home or the purchase of your home to happen. And then you may be in a better position to select which contract is going to work for you, because again, this can cost substantial amounts of time, money, and a lot of effort on behalf of everyone involved. So I hope this discussion was helpful. I would say, in summary, if you ask me which contract I prefer, I would probably say it depends on the situation. But for what it's worth, most of the agreements that we see written now are on the as-is agreement. So most homes that you're seeing pended have a period of time where a buyer can get out and the seller is not obligated to warrant anything or make any repairs. As always, I hope this is helpful. I know it's a lot, but if you'd like to talk more about the Florida real estate contract, repairs, and your particular real estate situation, please feel free to reach out.